Imagine your own daughter looking you dead in the eye and saying, "My greatest birthday wishes for you to die." That's what happened to me on my 72nd birthday, and it changed everything. For decades, I had lived my life in service of my daughter Rebecca. Every birthday, every holiday, every little achievement of hers had come at the cost of my own happiness. I had spent years balancing work, family, and her endless demands, always putting her first, always sacrificing. And yet, nothing I did seemed to matter. Not the hours spent listening to her complaints. Not the money I lent when she was in financial trouble. Not the sacrifices I made so she could live comfortably. Everything came to a brutal head on my 72nd birthday. I had been secretly hoping for a kind word, a small gesture to show appreciation, or anything that might validate decades of love and effort. Instead, I received words that shattered me. "My greatest birthday wishes for you to die." The sentence echoed in my mind like a cruel mantra. My heart broke, but strangely, clarity began to form in the wreckage. I realized that the love I had given so freely had been mistaken for entitlement, my devotion misinterpreted as weakness, and my presence as obligation. The next few days were a blur of emotion, anger, hurt, disbelief, but underneath it all, a flicker of determination began to grow. Maybe it was time to stop living for others. Maybe it was finally time to reclaim my life. I began thinking of ways to leave, to escape the constant demands and manipulation, and to breathe without guilt or fear. The idea was terrifying, yet exhilarating. For the first time in decades, I considered a life that was just mine. I confided in my neighbor, Elvira, a woman I trusted more than anyone. She had seen my exhaustion and had witnessed the way my daughter drained me emotionally and financially. "You deserve happiness, Julieta," she said quietly but firmly. "Maybe it's time you stop giving so much of yourself to people who don't truly care." Her words sparked a fire inside me. That night, I began making plans, not just vague ideas, but real steps toward freedom. I researched cities where I could live independently, found temporary apartments, and calculated the money I had spent supporting Rebecca over the last 5 years, almost $50,000, money I could have used for myself, money I could use to rebuild my own life. By the end of that week, I had made a decision. I would leave, not out of spite, not to punish Rebecca, but to save myself. I didn't know what awaited me, only that staying would mean another decade of the same pain, the same emotional abuse. It was time to step into the unknown. As I booked my flight and packed my bags, I had no idea that my disappearance would ignite a chain of events neither I nor my daughter could have imagined. What would happen when Rebecca realized I was she truly gone? The day of my departure arrived. At the airport, I felt an unusual mix of fear and exhilaration. I had received several calls from Rebecca, none of which I answered. Her texts were frantic. "Mom, this is ridiculous. The kids are asking about you. Call me." I deleted them without a second thought. For years, I had been tethered to her emotional whims. Now, for the first time, I was untethered. The flight to Zurich was long, but it offered a rare sense of peace. As the plane soared above clouds, I wrote in my journal every incident, every harsh word, every sacrifice I had made for Rebecca spilled onto the pages. Writing it down made me feel lighter, as if I were unloading the weight of decades onto paper. I realized that my life had been defined by the needs of others, and now, finally, I could define it for myself. Upon landing, I was greeted by Klaus, a young, professional representative from the travel agency, holding a sign with my name. "Welcome to Switzerland, Mrs. Johnson," he said warmly. "I hope you're ready for a new chapter." I smiled, a genuine smile I hadn't felt in years. The city was beautiful, quiet streets, sparkling lakes, and a sense of calm that contrasted sharply with the chaos I had left behind. Klaus handed me a folder with information about the city, restaurants, social clubs, German lessons, and even a meeting with a financial advisor. Everything was prepared for me to settle in fully, and I felt an intoxicating sense of security that evening. Alone in my small, cozy apartment overlooking the lake, I allowed myself a small indulgence, a silk scarf I had wanted for years. No guilt, no calculations about who needed the money. It was mine. For the first time in decades, I spent money on myself. not on Rebecca. As I walked along the lake the next morning, I mentally calculated how much I had spent on her over the years, thousands for braces, gifts, gas for trips, and food for her family. I could have traveled the world, pursued long-forgotten dreams, or simply lived comfortably. Instead, all that had been poured into someone who considered my love a burden. At T precisely p.m., my phone began vibrating incessantly. It was Rebecca. I let it ring, savoring the moment of power I had never known before. When I finally answered, her voice cracked with desperation. "Mom, where are you?" "Elvira said you disappeared." I responded calmly, enjoying the serenity around me. "I am exactly where I need to be, far from the chaos you created." Her typical response followed: excuses, guilt, and apologies that didn't acknowledge her cruelty. "I didn't mean it. I was frustrated." "I need you," she said. I realized she didn't need me as a mother, she needed me as a safety net. For years, I had been invisible except when she required my support. That night, as I sipped wine by the Swiss lake, I knew this was only the beginning. What would happen when Rebecca faced the full consequences of her actions without me there to fix them? The next morning in Zurich felt surreal. I woke early and wandered through the streets, savoring the simplicity of my independence. Breakfast was at a lakeside cafe, where I indulged in fresh pastries and coffee, paying no mind to the clock or the cost. For the first time, every decision I made belonged solely to me. I bought flowers for my apartment, arranged them in a vase, and smiled at the reflection of my own face. I realized I hadn't truly done something for myself in decades. I thought about the years of sacrifices, mortgage payments when David had lost his job, braces for the twins, gifts, groceries, and trips to watch the children. At least 50. Oh, money that could have been mine, money that could have fueled my dreams. Instead, it had been poured into a daughter who considered my care and love an obligation rather than a blessing. I felt no regret for the love I had given, only clarity about how much of my life I had surrendered. That afternoon, I calculated the time back home. It would soon be morning, and Elvira, my trusted neighbor, would deliver the letter that had set everything in motion. My phone vibrated hours later. Rebecca's name flashed across the screen. I let it ring until it stopped, savoring the anticipation. When I finally answered, her voice trembled. "Mom, where are you?" "Elvira said you vanished. Please tell me you're okay." I answered calmly, as if speaking from a distance I had never had before. "I am exactly where I need to be, far from the chaos that has consumed my life." Her desperation was palpable. She claimed she didn't mean the cruel words she had spoken, that she was stressed and frustrated. Yet, at no point did she acknowledge the years of manipulation or the harm she had caused. She needed me not as a mother, but as a provider. Her tone shifted from pleading to demanding as she realized the financial consequences of my absence. "We need you. The house, the bills. We can't manage without you." I listened quietly, savoring the long overdue truth. Rebecca finally realized that the comfort she had always enjoyed was tied to my sacrifices. My absence was not just a personal act of rebellion, it was a lesson in consequences. No one could call me for favors, and no one could demand my time or money. For the first time, I existed entirely for myself, and the realization was intoxicating. That evening, alone by the lake, I wrote in my journal about the liberation I felt. The distant mountains mirrored the vastness of the freedom I had claimed. I knew this was just the beginning, and that Rebecca's reaction was merely the first ripple of what was to come. Little did I know, the choices I had made would unleash a chain of events that would test both their resilience and my resolve. Events that would lead to the most profound transformation of my life. The following day in Zurich dawned crisp and clear. I woke refreshed, without the usual weight of obligations pressing on me. For the first time in years, I could plan my day based solely on what I wanted. I wandered through the city, enjoying the serene parks and charming streets. I stopped at a boutique and bought a silk scarf, something extravagant and entirely unnecessary. I smiled at the thought that this was my first purchase purely for myself in decades. By late morning, my phone buzzed endlessly. Missed calls, urgent messages, and a rising tide of panic from Rebecca and David. It was fascinating to observe how quickly their concern escalated once they understood the financial and practical consequences of my absence. I chose to respond to just one message. I am well and exactly where I need to be. Do not search for me. Almost immediately, replies flooded in, ranging from desperation to thinly veiled threats. It became clear her care for me had always been conditional. Now that my presence was no longer guaranteed, she realized what she had lost. Later that day, I met with Herr Meyer, the Swiss financial advisor. He walked me through options. I had never seriously considered permanent residency, investments, and a life structured entirely around my own needs. His words were liberating. For the first time, I was calculating my finances not to support someone else's lifestyle, but to secure my own happiness and freedom. Every dollar I spent and invested now reflected my priorities, not my daughter's whims. By the evening, I had fully immersed myself in the reality of my new life. Alone at a lakeside restaurant, I ordered the finest dish on the menu and sipped French wine. I savored the novelty of a life without guilt or constant requests. For the first time, I could appreciate my own worth and celebrate the courage it took to walk away. Over the next few days, I began interacting with the local community of expats. I met Ingrid, a German woman who had similarly escaped a life dominated by demanding children. Sharing our stories, I realized I wasn't alone. Her experiences mirrored mine: years of sacrifice, guilt, and manipulation, followed by liberation and rediscovery. Ingrid's words resonated deeply. They never cared about our happiness. They only wanted what we could give them. As I returned to my apartment that night, I reflected on how much my perspective had shifted. No longer would I define my life by the needs of those who had taken me for granted. For the first time, I was free, and it was intoxicating. But just as I began to enjoy this newfound peace, a series of unexpected challenges loomed on the horizon. Challenges that would test not only my resolve but the very foundations of my freedom. By the next morning, my phone was overflowing with notifications. Rebecca's messages had escalated from pleading to desperate accusations. "Mom, you can't just vanish. What if something happens to you?" One read. Another warned, "The bank called, we could lose the house." It was almost comical to see how quickly her concern shifted from me to the financial consequences of my absence. I realized that for decades, my love and sacrifices had been taken for granted. Now, the reality of losing me was sinking in. I decided to respond with clarity and firmness. "I am fine. I am exactly where I need to be. These are the consequences of your choices." The reaction was immediate. Messages poured in faster than I could read, blending panic, anger, and thinly veiled threats. It was a stark reminder. The daughter who once wished for my death was now realizing what it meant to live without me as a constant safety net. Later that day, I met Herr Meyer again. He explained that with my current savings and investments, Switzerland offered me the opportunity to live comfortably for the rest of my life. Medical care was top-notch. My pension could be fully transferred, and with prudent investments, my wealth could grow steadily. For the first time, I thought not about the family's emergencies but about my own dreams. I could travel, take courses, and explore new hobbies without guilt or interruption. Encouraged by this knowledge, I ventured further into the city. I joined a hiking group of older adults seeking adventure. There, I met Ingrid again, along with others who had chosen themselves over toxic family dynamics. As we shared our stories, I realized the pattern was universal: children who demanded, manipulated, and took without appreciation. Ingrid's words struck a chord. When they only care about what you give, that is not love, that's exploitation. That evening, back in my apartment, I finally reviewed all the messages from Rebecca and David. They were a record of escalating desperation, now overwhelmingly financial in nature. It was clear they hadn't mourned my absence. They feared losing access to my support. For the first time, I could observe this truth without guilt. I had been trapped in a cycle of obligation and manipulation, and now I was free. As I closed my phone, a sense of calm washed over me. My new life in Switzerland was beginning to take shape, one built on freedom, dignity, and self-respect. I felt the first real peace I had experienced in decades. Yet deep down, I knew that my journey was far from over. The challenges I had faced so far were only the beginning of reclaiming my life and securing the boundaries I had long denied myself. But even as I began to savor this hard-won freedom, Rebecca's next move would test my patience, my courage, and the legal protections I had just started to build around my independence. Just when I thought the chaos had subsided, a call from an unfamiliar number shattered the quiet of my morning. "Mrs. Johnson? This is Sarah Williams from the Family Services Department back home," the voice said. My heart skipped a beat. Apparently, Rebecca had filed a complaint claiming I might be suffering from cognitive decline and making risky financial decisions abroad. She had even gone so far as to allege that I was mentally unfit to manage my own affairs. I took a deep breath and responded firmly. "I am living in Switzerland by choice, fully capable of managing my finances and decisions. There is no cognitive decline. My mental health is excellent." The social worker remained professional but insisted they needed to verify my well-being. I agreed immediately. If anything, I was confident that an official evaluation would expose the truth of Rebecca's manipulations. After arranging a thorough medical and psychological evaluation through the American consulate, I contacted my lawyer, Anil, back home. I explained the situation, and he sighed knowingly. "Rebecca is pushing every boundary she can, Julieta. She's trying to invalidate your legal decisions and regain control over your assets. But don't worry, she has no real case." Anil outlined her tactics, attempting to block the sale of my apartment, questioning my mental capacity, and even trying to access my bank accounts. Every move she made revealed her true motivations, not concern for my health, but a desperate need to reclaim financial control. I felt a surge of clarity and determination. For the first time in decades, I wasn't defending myself out of guilt. I was protecting my life and hard-won independence. 2 days later, I attended the evaluations at the American consulate. The doctors were thorough and professional. After 3 hours of examinations, the lead physician concluded, "Mrs. Johnson is in perfect mental health. Her decisions are made with full awareness and competence. Any claims to the contrary are unfounded." Relief washed over me. This official report would serve as a shield against Rebecca's manipulations and a record of my autonomy. When I received confirmation that social services had closed the case and documented the false complaint, a sense of triumph mingled with anger. I had survived not only emotional abuse but also an attempt to undermine my legal and mental credibility. Finally, I could turn my attention fully to building the life I had dreamed of for decades, without fear, without manipulation, and without the weight of ungrateful family demands. Rehook. But freedom is rarely simple. Even as I celebrated this victory, I knew Rebecca would not give up so easily, and the next twist would force me to confront not just my past sacrifices but the very core of my independence. With Rebecca's false claims officially dismissed, I finally allowed myself to breathe fully. My mornings in Zurich began with serenity, a gentle walk along the lake, coffee at the small cafe I had grown fond of, and journaling my thoughts without the shadow of demands or guilt. For the first time in decades, I was living entirely for myself. I started organizing my life with intention. I joined German language classes 3 times a week, which opened doors to local friendships and cultural immersion. Art, something I had abandoned long ago, became my sanctuary. Watercolor painting classes on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons became not just a hobby but a declaration. I could create beauty for myself, not for anyone else. Sundays were reserved for a book club of expats, women and men of varied ages who, like me, had chosen to rebuild their lives. Their stories resonated deeply, and for the first time, I felt a sense of belonging and shared understanding. Financially, I began exploring opportunities I had always dreamed of but never pursued. Herr Meyer, my financial advisor, helped me strategize stable investments that would secure not just my comfort but also my legacy. Calculating my expenses without the constant shadow of Rebecca's needs was liberating. I realized that the over $50,000 I had spent on her whims in the last 5 years could now have been used to travel, indulge in my passions, and save for a worry-free retirement. That realization came with a bittersweetness but also a sense of reclaiming what was rightfully mine. Yet, Despite the calm and fulfillment, the echoes of the past were never far. My phone, which had been silent for days, suddenly buzzed with missed calls and messages. They were from Rebecca and David, a mix of desperation and panic. They had realized, finally, that their dependence on me was no longer guaranteed. I read their messages carefully, noting how quickly concern for my well-being transformed into anxiety over their financial instability. At first, a twinge of guilt surfaced, but it was swiftly replaced with understanding. The consequences of their choices were theirs alone. I decided to respond minimally. One message sufficed: I am safe, healthy, and thriving. What you are experiencing are the natural consequences of your choices. Reflect and learn. The brevity of my reply marked a turning point. For the first time, I communicated boundaries clearly, without the fear of retaliation or guilt. This moment crystallized something profound. Freedom was not only about distance or money, it was about asserting control over my own life and refusing to be manipulated ever again. But even as my life in Switzerland blossomed, a new opportunity emerged, one that would transform my story from a personal liberation into a beacon for others. It was a chance to share my experience, to teach, and to heal not just myself, but countless women trapped in similar webs of emotional and financial exploitation. A week after asserting my boundaries, I received an unexpected email from a blog I had recently discovered. It was dedicated to stories of older women who had reclaimed their lives after enduring toxic family relationships. The editor wrote, "Your story is powerful, inspiring, and needs to be shared. Would you consider a video interview for our YouTube channel?" I hesitated for a moment. Part of me still felt the sting of betrayal and the fear of opening old wounds publicly. But another part, the stronger, wiser part that had emerged over the past months, urged me forward. I accepted. It was time to transform my experience from private pain into public empowerment. The preparation for the interview became a cathartic process. I revisited my journals, my letters, and even the notes I had taken during my flight to Switzerland. Each word I read reminded me of how far I had come from feeling trapped, guilty, and emotionally drained to standing firmly in my truth. I realized that my story was not just about what Rebecca had done. It was about the courage it took to reclaim my life, to rediscover myself, and to make choices purely for my own well-being. The day of the interview arrived. As I sat in front of the camera, I felt a mix of nervousness and exhilaration. I shared my journey, the sacrifices, the manipulations, the heartbreak, and finally, the liberation. I explained how setting boundaries, embracing independence, and prioritizing self-respect had allowed me to rebuild my life. I spoke candidly about finances, about freedom, and about the emotional strength it takes to say no more. The video went live 2 weeks later. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of women commented, sharing their own experiences with adult children who had manipulated or exploited them. One woman wrote about a son who refused to work and constantly demanded money. Another confessed she had been guilt-tripped into sacrificing her own health for her children's convenience. The stories mirrored my own, and I realized that my experience resonated far beyond my personal life. Among the responses, one email caught my eye. It was from David, my former son-in-law. He admitted he had witnessed Rebecca's manipulation firsthand but felt powerless due to his financial dependence on me. His words didn't ask for forgiveness, nor did they attempt to pressure me to return. Instead, he expressed understanding, and for the first time, a member of my family acknowledged the injustice I had endured. It was a quiet validation, a recognition that my choices were not only necessary but righteous. Just as I began to feel the deep satisfaction of being heard and understood, life in Switzerland offered another twist, one that would not only solidify my independence but also bring unexpected rewards, both financial and emotional. Life in Switzerland was beginning to feel like a dream I never imagined I could live. My days were filled with art classes, German lessons, and walks along the serene lakes. Every choice I made was for me, and for the first time in decades, I felt a sense of control over my own life. But alongside personal growth, there was another aspect of my liberation that I had long postponed: financial justice. A few weeks After the interview went live, I received a call from my lawyer, Anil, with news that made my heart race. Rebecca's mortgage had officially fallen behind. With David unable to find a stable job and Rebecca now forced back to work, the bank had begun foreclosure proceedings. As the co-signer, I had the right to reclaim my initial investment. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, I had been financially responsible, sacrificing my own savings to maintain their lifestyle. And now the scales of consequence were finally tipping. I remember sitting on my balcony, the Alps glistening in the distance as I processed the news. I didn't feel a rush of joy at their misfortune. This was not about revenge, but rather a profound satisfaction that the consequences of reckless decisions were being fully realized. For the first time, Rebecca and David had to face reality without a safety net. I felt a calm sense of justice, the kind that only comes when you stop rescuing those who have repeatedly refused your help. Anil also shared updates about my other assets. My apartment in my hometown had finally sold, netting a significant sum. Combined with the recovery from the foreclosed mortgage, my wealth had grown far beyond what I had ever imagined. At 72, I realized that I was entering a new chapter of life, not only free from emotional manipulation but also financially empowered in ways I had only dreamed of decades earlier. The following days were spent managing these new developments. I arranged for the smooth transfer of funds to my Swiss accounts, updated my investments with Herr Meyer, and allowed myself to make small, indulgent purchases that I had previously denied. Each transaction, no matter how trivial, was a reaffirmation of independence, a declaration that my money, my time, and my happiness were finally mine. Even as I celebrated, I knew this was more than just financial freedom. It was the embodiment of years of patience, courage, and clarity. For decades, I had defined my worth by how much I gave to others. Now, my worth was defined by the life I chose to live on my own terms. And yet, in the back of my mind, I knew the story was far from over. My family's reaction, the emotional repercussions of their loss, and the responsibilities of my new life were all chapters yet to unfold. Just as I began to fully embrace my newfound stability, an unexpected letter arrived, a handwritten message from my grandchildren that would stir emotions I hadn't anticipated and challenge my heart in ways I never imagined. Life had settled into a rhythm I had never known, days filled with creativity, learning, and quiet luxury. But then, one crisp morning, the postman handed me a letter that made my heart skip a beat. The handwriting was familiar, yet I couldn't immediately place it. Carefully, I opened the envelope, and the words inside transported me back to decades of love, loss, and difficult choices. It was from my grandchildren, now 12 years old, writing together in their small, neat scrawl. "Dear Grandma Julieta," they wrote, "we miss you so much. Dad told us everything that happened, and we now understand why you left. Mom said some very hurtful things to you, but we know you were brave and strong to make the choices you did. We are proud of you. When we are older, we would like to visit you in Switzerland if you want us to. We love you, Grandma." Their letter also included drawings, simple yet heartfelt, illustrations of me walking among the Swiss mountains, painting by the lake, and enjoying my life. I held the paper to my chest and felt a wave of emotion unlike anything I had anticipated. It wasn't sadness, nor guilt. It was a deep, almost healing sense of validation. My decision to leave had been agonizing, yet necessary. Seeing it reflected through the eyes of my grandchildren, I realized that my courage was being recognized and appreciated in a pure, untainted way. I spent a long hour reflecting on my journey, from a mother crushed by ungratefulness to a woman reclaiming her autonomy. The transformation felt monumental. I carefully wrote back, pouring my heart into each word. "My dearest grandchildren, your message is the most beautiful gift I have received in years. I love you deeply and always will, no matter the distance. When you are older and able to make your own decisions, the doors to my heart and my home will always be open. Until then, know that your grandma is living fully and happily, surrounded by peace and beauty. Keep your love for me, but remember that relationships are built on respect and care, not only on sacrifices." That letter marked a turning point. It reminded me that while I had protected my own life and well-being, I I had also maintained a connection to the next generation in a healthy, non-sacrificial way. For the first time, I felt a harmony between freedom and love, proof that choosing oneself does not mean abandoning those we care for. Yet, even in this moment of serenity, I knew my story was still unfolding. There were chapters of growth, recognition, and challenges ahead, as life has a way of testing even the strongest resolve. But for now, I allowed myself to sit on the balcony, gaze at the mountains, and savor the quiet triumph of 3 years of rebirth. But just when I thought peace had fully settled into my life, a surprising call arrived that would test my boundaries, my courage, and the very freedom I had fought so hard to reclaim. It was a bright spring morning when my phone rang, displaying an international number I didn't recognize. My curiosity outweighed caution, and I answered. "Mrs. Julieta Johnson?" A composed female voice asked in a clear American accent. "Yes, this is she," I replied, a little wary. "My name is Sarah Williams. I'm a social worker in your hometown. We've received a report concerning your well-being." My heart skipped a beat. A report? After everything I had endured, my daughter had gone this far? Sarah continued carefully. "Your daughter has expressed concerns about your mental health, alleging that you may be suffering from cognitive decline and that your recent decisions abroad might put you at risk." I sat down slowly, disbelief mixing with fury. Rebecca had not only wished me dead, but she was now trying to use the system to force me back under her control. I took a steady breath and said firmly, "I assure you, I am in perfect mental health. My move to Switzerland is a fully conscious decision, made independently and responsibly." Sarah maintained her professionalism, explaining that the department needed verification of my health and well-being. "Could we arrange a medical and psychological evaluation through the American consulate in Switzerland?" she asked, calmly. I agreed. "I welcome any evaluation that confirms my complete lucidity," I replied, sensing that this was an opportunity not just to defend myself but to establish a permanent record of independence. After hanging up, I immediately called Anil, my lawyer back home. "Julieta!" I expected a long call from Rebecca, but this, he said, the concern in his voice apparent. I explained the situation, and he assured me that Rebecca's claims held no legal weight. "You planned your departure carefully, you're financially independent, and you are living responsibly. Her attempts to challenge your decisions are baseless," he said. The following week, I attended the evaluation at the consulate. The doctor, an older, empathetic man, conducted a thorough assessment lasting hours. At the conclusion, he turned to me and said, "Mrs. Johnson, not only are you in perfect mental health, but your ability to make reasoned, deliberate choices is exemplary. Your daughter's allegations are unfounded and likely manipulative." Relief washed over me. This professional confirmation was more than a validation. It was a shield against further interference. When the social worker called back with the official result, confirming that Rebecca's claims were baseless and that the case would be closed, I finally felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It was the closure I had needed to fully embrace the freedom I had fought so hard to achieve. Just as I was beginning to savor this victory, I received a message from someone I had never expected, an old acquaintance whose news would once again shift the course off of my new life. The days that followed brought an unexpected sense of calm. My mornings were filled with gentle walks along Zurich's lakeside, the air crisp and fresh, and the mountains standing like silent guardians of my newfound freedom. Life was no longer dictated by urgent phone calls, endless requests, or the weight of unappreciated sacrifices. I had built a life where I was the priority, and for the first time in decades, I felt fully in control of my happiness. Then, one afternoon, an email appeared in my inbox from David, my former son-in-law. His words were sincere, almost a confession. He admitted witnessing the way Rebecca had manipulated and used me, and he expressed regret for never standing up sooner. He acknowledged that I had always been the stabilizing force in their lives and that they had taken my love and generosity for granted. His message didn't erase the pain of the past, but it was a form of acknowledgement, a quiet justice in itself. I also began receiving letters from readers of my book. Women from all over the world shared their experiences of manipulation, exploitation, and emotional abuse by their adult children. Their words were filled with gratitude, courage, and newfound hope. Some had made radical changes in their lives, inspired by my story. One letter, in particular, brought tears to my eyes. A young mother admitted that she had been treating her own elderly mother the same way Rebecca had treated me. After reading my book, she had reached out to apologize and commit to changing the pattern for the sake of love and respect. The thought that my pain had helped prevent another family from experiencing the same destruction filled me with profound satisfaction. And then, 3 years after that fateful birthday that had changed my life forever, a letter arrived from my grandchildren, now 12 years old. Their handwriting, so sweet and childlike, conveyed love, understanding, and admiration. They expressed pride in me, a desire to visit when they were older, and an acknowledgement that I had made the right choice by protecting my dignity. I cried for an hour, not out of sadness, but out of the deep recognition that my decisions had been justified and that love, true love, could survive distance and time. Sitting on my balcony that evening, overlooking the serene Swiss mountains, I felt an immense gratitude. At 75, I had more than financial stability. I had peace, respect, and self-worth. I had transformed suffering into empowerment, sacrifice into wisdom, and loss into a life of joy. My disappearance from my daughter's life had been the most liberating gift I could give both her and myself. If you found this story inspiring, remember, your happiness matters, and it's never too late to reclaim your life. Share this story with someone who needs courage. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more real-life journeys of strength, survival, and liberation. Click on the videos on the screen for other stories of transformation. Your journey begins today.